It is what it is.
Start.
It is what it is.
16 minutes.
Good, grade 8. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, grade 8. Thank you to our adjudicators today, Mrs. Madaba, Mr. Fernandez, and Ms. Lloyd. So we're going to start, and good luck, everybody. And we're starting recording now, and Ms. Jody's watching us. Okay? Do your best. Topics about the Renaissance, and there, the two opposing points will talk about how the Renaissance was biased towards the aristocrats. They'll have their assertions in the last part of their speech. Okay. The pros are Gavin, Ciara, and Lucia, and Marshall, the character of Kaya. Marshall's is recorded.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, adjudicators, and fellow debaters. My name is Lucia Ruperta, and the motion for today's debate is the Renaissance period was biased towards the aristocrats. We are on the positive side of this motion. As the first speaker, I'll be sharing to you why I think the Renaissance period was biased towards the aristocrats, because the exposure to high-quality education was only accessible by the aristocrats. The second speaker, Shara, will share her view on how the Renaissance period was biased towards the aristocrats because only the wealthy had held influential positions in key institutions like political offices, enabling them to shape cultures, norms, and values. Lastly, Gavin, our third speaker, will be talking about how those who controlled and commissioned art were of the aristocracy or of the wealthy and prosperous. Before I state my points, I would like to define some major key terms that you will likely hear during this debate. According to the Oxford Dictionary, Renaissance is a period in Europe during the 14th to 16th century when people became interested in ideas and cultures of ancient Greece, Rome, and used these influences in their art and literature. Aristocrats is someone whose family has a high social ranking, especially someone who has a title. Aristocrats can also be described as noble and wealthy. Bias is a strong feeling in favor against one group of people, often not based in fair judgment. I would like to first discuss on how art and literature were very significant during the Renaissance. Art and literature were both able to portray such substantial concepts. These concepts and ideas were on wealth, religious status, social status, identities, beauty, realism, self-awareness, and a sense of emotion such that they allowed others to imagine how some situations would be in the past, present, and future. Concepts like these were crucial during the rediscovering of classical philosophy, literature, and art, allowing others to shape the way they thought and acted. Being able to present these concepts required some sort of professional education in philosophy, science, mathematics, anatomy, politics, etc. Being capable of learning these topics through an excellent educational system allowed for better intellectual analysis of your subject, which was crucial in being able to pursue your career in art or literature. Education during the Renaissance was known to be highly valued. Though it was highly valued, it was known that school was for the more fortunate, and the many who could not afford to go to school likely ended up working for the nobles. Nevertheless, the non-privileged weren't able to speak out for themselves, as they were controlled by the nobles. Without the privilege of getting quality education, you would not be able to make a difference in society. It was also common for the aristocracy to have well-known or master artists to teach them art skills, as well as guide them through success while they were growing up. If you were to study, let's take anatomy as an example, you'd be able to create better concepts on how the human body is structured and formed, allowing you to create such detailed sculptures and paintings emphasizing the human body's motion of beauty. An artist who was able to present this is the Italian artist Michelangelo. Michelangelo was born into a relatively wealthy family, and this privilege allowed him to study sculpture's anatomy and physiology at the University of Florence. He was also sent to study under Domenico Ghirlandaio, a Florentine ruler where he then connected with Lorenzo de' Medici. This allowed Michelangelo to display a more human form in a lifelike representation, creating a big impact during the Renaissance. Thank you.
care about.
Alright, okay. That's just...
Alright.
Not very much. Okay,
First speaker, then first speaker, negative guys. I don't know why.
rebuttal
Thank you
speaker.
for each speaker.
Or rebuttal now.
First speaker, negative, rebuts.
Wait, so it's not first speaker, rebuttal.
Maybe first speaker, that's her.
Rebuttal.
Yeah, so
Rebuttal on your speech. Yeah.
It's first.
It's not the science format. It's humanities. First speaker, negative, you have 4 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow educators. The topic for our debate is the Renaissance period was biased towards aristocrats. However, we, the negative team, believe that the statement is false. Today, as the first speaker, I will be introducing the statement of this debate, introducing the terms that will be used during this debate, and our side's assertions as to why we believe the statement of this debate is false. Our second speaker will be talking about how we believe the Renaissance period was not biased towards aristocrats due to the fact that the Renaissance period was a time projected towards putting those with talent in the spotlight, instead of aristocrats and those with money. Our third speaker and last speaker will finally be talking about how we believe that the Renaissance period was not rebut and sum up our team case. But now I'd like to speak about the terms that will be found in this debate and my reasons as a member of the common team to why I believe the Renaissance period was not biased towards aristocrats. The terms that we will be discussing and using in this debate is the Renaissance period was a European era where art and culture was passionately expressed from the 14th century to the 17th century. It contained vague but beautiful literature, new philosophy, and old philosophy from the time of ancient Greece. The second term I will be using is aristocrats, which are people higher in the hierarchy that possess noble blood but favor of the government. The third term we will be using is bias, which is a strong favor toward the group or a single person without proper logic. My assertion and main belief as a member of the common team in this stand on the Renaissance is that the most Renaissance artists who grew to fame and popularity came from humble beginnings and did not come from rich and aristocratic houses and families. One reason that justifies this claim is the fact that two of the most well-renowned artists, Rafael Sanzio da Urbino and Donato Niccoli de Beto-Bardi, or Donatello, were both artists in the Renaissance. Who came from the bottom and climbed their way to the top through talent and talent alone. This is to say that they had no sponsorship or patronage from the aristocrats. There are many other examples other than these two artists, like people such as Andrea Mantegna, who was the second son of a common woodworker and eventually became the adopted son of an artist, who rose in the ranks and became a devout historical painter with topics such as ancient Rome. There are, of course, examples of rich, successful artists such as Titian and Michelangelo and even Botticelli. However, the popular artists who were rich are around the same amount of those who aren't, thus proving that there were no biases in the Renaissance, merely just a bias towards the talent and those who work fervently towards their artistic goals. Thank you, Manager.
You have 3 minutes to second speaker, affirmative side. 1 minute.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, adjudicators, and debaters. My name is Ciara, and the topic of our debate today is the Renaissance period was biased towards the aristocrats, and we believe that this statement is true. I will be arguing that only the wealthy held influential positions in key institutions like political offices, enabling them to shape rules and values. First, I would like to rebut Iker's point. Iker mentioned that it was the talent that put you on the spotlight, not wealth, but it was wealth that fueled the Renaissance. Iker mentioned Donatello was one of the people who rose with pure talent, but he was educated at the home of a wealthy institution in Florence. People, at least in the Renaissance, were unable to progress their career without learning from an artist already established in the industry. While they did recruit based on talent, without enough wealth, Whether it came from the patrons or themselves, they could not buy the proper paint, canvases, and other supplies which were necessary to well paint. Moving on to my point, take, for instance, the positions of influence aristocrats held in 3 powerful political offices during the Renaissance. During this era, Italy was divided into many city-states. The most powerful city-states were Milan, Venice, and Florence, each with different government types. Throughout this period, Milan had a centralized monarchy. For the majority of the Renaissance, the noble family that ruled in Milan was the Sforza family, beginning with Francesco Sforza, who came to rule through military power, which the Sforza family, as aristocrats with the available resources and wealth, funded and supported. In this case, the military is a key institution that was influenced by aristocrats. Venice, the largest city in Italy during the Renaissance, was governed by an oligarchy. Though the oligarchy was made up of both merchants and Venetian aristocrats. As stated in etsu.edu, the political system was largely controlled by a small group of wealthy aristocratic families such as the Contarini and Mocenigo family. These families held significant power and influence over the government, often monopolizing political positions and decision-making. Lastly, the city-state of Florence. Florence started as a republic where there was a constitution which limited the power of nobility and aristocrats, as well as the laborers. However, this government style was disrupted. As stated in pbs.org, continual war weakened the city-states, finances, and political independence. Through this, the Medicis, aided by the Pope, appointed Alessandro Medici to rule Florence, transforming the Republic of Florence into a hereditary monarchy. The Medici family, the most powerful family in the Renaissance, ruled the biggest city-state. All 3 of these city-states during the Renaissance were predominantly ruled and controlled by aristocratic families, giving them the great political and social power. With control of the key institutions, aristocrats were positioned to capitalize on the Renaissance and have influence that enabled them to shape the values and rules of the Renaissance. My second point is about the connection between wealth and power, and how these things enable you to shape the world around you. This connection, as seen in the Renaissance, can also be seen in today's world. Wealth is an accumulation of resources, these resources being education, personal connections, land, and money itself. Resources that were a necessity to have influence in the Renaissance period and are still a necessity to have influence in today's world. The Philippines is a perfect example. There currently is some broad-based growth and transformation in the Philippines. However, this was and still is an oligarchical society where few families have tremendous influence over wealth compared to others. This progress that has happened in the Philippines has improved the lives for many different people in different classes, but it has to a greater extent served the families that really dominate the political, economic, and social spheres of our society. Ladies and gentlemen, when you are at the top of society, you take advantage of the broad-based opportunities provided to you, which is how the advancements, transformations, and enlightenments of the Renaissance were biased towards the aristocrats. Thank you.
The second speaker from the
Good afternoon, Mr. and Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gr8. The topic for our debate is that the Renaissance was biased towards the aristocrats. We, the executive team, believe that this statement is false, and we disagree with the claim that the Renaissance was biased towards the aristocrats. The first speaker of the affirmative team has tried to tell you that the Renaissance was biased towards the aristocrats because of the wealth found through the aristocratic birth. However, the people who had aristocratic backgrounds as artists were as famous as those who weren't. This gives me the reason to believe that there's initially a bias and advantage towards the aristocrats. However, that advantage was briefly shut down because of the equality of those with common and backgrounds, and those with aristocratic backgrounds with sheer talent. Our first speaker has already stated many popular artists from the Renaissance had humble beginnings. And today I will be talking to you about the second reason why the Renaissance wasn't biased towards the aristocrats. My assertion on why the Renaissance was not biased towards the aristocrats is because the Renaissance was known as a period that was projected towards putting talent over money. The first point, and as to why the Renaissance was known as a period that was projected towards putting talent before money, is because according to History.com, a very reliable source for historical information, the Renaissance was a fervent period of European cultural, artistic, and political and economic rebirth following the Middle Ages. As Gr8 said during his speech, the most famous artists that are extremely well known in the Renaissance came from humble beginnings and were not part of aristocratic families, nor had any affiliation with them prior to them making the most iconic and famous art pieces, which are known for revolutionizing certain techniques with famous art piece, with each piece to be individualistic, which does fit with the Renaissance being known as an artistic rebirth. The art pieces made during that artistic period, for the most part, do not show any kind of bias towards aristocrats, but more about individualism or secularism. My second point on why the Renaissance was known as a period where it was putting talent before money is because artists in the Renaissance were known for their talent and artwork, not because of their status and money. When artists in the Renaissance come to mind, you would think about their work and how much famous they and their paintings were even today. It's not because nowadays most people would see their paintings in most media, such as movies or shows, and what comes to mind when thinking about those paintings is the painting itself and the art behind it. Like how the Mona Lisa is known to have Leonardo da Vinci as artist and that painting, and how the creation of Adam is known to be made by Michelangelo. Aristocracy would not come to mind when thinking about these famous paintings. Like I said, my reason, this period in time was known for talent and artwork and not status and money. And when you think about the Renaissance and its paintings, you will automatically think about the artwork, artists, etc., instead of anything related to aristocracy. My last point on why the Renaissance was known as a period that was putting towards talent for money is because iconic art pieces were either made by low-class or middle-class individuals. This is because most Renaissance artists may have been supported by aristocratic individuals, but that did not change whatsoever. Whatsoever change their status, and as they have remained the same class of people until death. It didn't matter whether they were the same It didn't matter whether they were low-class or even aristocratic. It's their meaning. It's their impact on the Renaissance and the art that would give the Renaissance its meaning. Not the aristocratic individuals who happen to make art or are just part of the party. It wouldn't matter if the famous artists were aristocrats or not, as long as it had an impact on the Renaissance and art, that's all that would matter. So Mr. Madam, the Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, and in conclusion, the Renaissance was not biased towards aristocrats because the Renaissance was known as a period known with talent over status, and because the Renaissance was known as a time where it was known to be an artistic, economic, and political rebirth. Artists in the Renaissance were known for their art, not their status, and iconic art pieces are.
You have a 3-minute break, and the judges must stop. 3 minutes break.
That's something that it's actually probably. Okay.
Not yet. Let's wait for
Yeah, I
everybody to
actually
come
do
back.
it.
Let's wait for everybody to come
I
back.
will do.
Ooh, this is weird.
My voice is
Hi.
my voice is not sounding.
No.
Actually, Gary, you speak. I like your speech.
Thank you, Grade 8.
Alright. Ooh. Okay, good morning, Madam Chairman, fellow adjudicators and debaters. My name is Gavin, and the topic of our debate today is the Renaissance period was biased towards aristocrats, and we believe that this statement is true. I would like to argue that those who controlled and commissioned the art were of the aristocracy or of the wealthy and prosperous. They controlled the artwork and what was produced by the artists. To rebut Kayan's speech, while we do view the artists nowadays without thoughts on the aristocracy behind them, we are talking about the period itself, not of how we think of them now. Wealth fueled the Renaissance. The artists were chasing fame and wealth, which gave us all these famous works. I will further prove this with my second point, which is on who commissioned different artworks. For my first point, I would like to argue that if the main patrons, the Medici, who both founded and funded the High Renaissance, disappeared, the Renaissance would be without direction. The Medici commissioned several famous artworks such as Sandro Botticelli's Birth of Venus and Donatello's Bronze David. In fact, the Medici supported and funded many artists, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Michelangelo, and Brunelleschi, so much so that they are sometimes called the godfathers of the Renaissance. For the Medici family, art represented the zenith of riches, prestige, and authority. They commissioned artists such as Benvenuto Cellini, Francesco Salviati, Raphael, and Bronzino to construct portraits of the family's most powerful members in order to present their dominance in politics. These portraits were laden with meaning, offering a version of the family members they felt would best suit their goals.
In an effort to elevate the Medici family's reputation, some portraits even depicted members of the family as mythical figures, making the members into gods. This was a way to improve their public image, making them more appealing in the public eye. For my second point, I would like to bring about a recognition for the other commissioners of different artworks, how the commissions were biased towards aristocrats, and give attention to how the people controlled which of the paintings got produced. The majority of great artworks produced throughout the Renaissance were commissioned and funded by aristocrats, governments, and civic and religious organizations. It turns out that for the poorer customers, there were pre-made statues and artworks. Also, for the Renaissance artist was often expected to sacrifice their own artistic sentiments and produce precisely what the customer ordered or expected. Whatever the commissioner told them to make, they had to produce. Speaking of the commissioners, most artworks were commissioned by a wealthy individual. To list a few, The Last Supper was commissioned by Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan. The Birth of Venus, as mentioned earlier, was commissioned by Lorenzo de' Medici. And Dying Slave, constructed by Michelangelo, was commissioned by Pope Julius II. There are many more examples of this. If you Google famous paintings of the Renaissance and check if they were commissioned, the likelihood is quite high that it was, and by an individual who is either wealthy or of aristocracy. Now to conclude, our first speaker discussed why having high-quality education was key in the Renaissance because it allowed them to practice individualism. She was also able to share an example of how Michelangelo, a popular Italian artist, used his privileges in his education. Our second speaker touched up on the political positions that were held by aristocrats in the biggest city-states of Italy, allowing them to shape rules and norms. And finally, I showed that because of several factors as commission bias and the Medici's controlling the output and direction of the art, we believe that this motion is true, that the Renaissance was truly weighted towards aristocrats. Thank you very much for listening to my speech.
You watch it.
Marshall. No, there's video. It's MP4. Zoom.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for debate is the Renaissance period was biased towards the aristocrats. We, the negative team, believe that this statement is false. I, as the third speaker of the negative team, will be... We believe that the Renaissance period was not biased towards the aristocrats because many popular Renaissance paintings were centered on ideas not related to aristocracy. Aristocrats, noblemen, or noblewomen, or the sponsors of these many artists, as well as the fact that aristocrats have had the same roles in Europe since different eras of history. My first piece of evidence that shows that this belief is correct is the fact that nobles and aristocrats during other eras in history, such as the Middle Ages, were treated amongst the same way as aristocrats in the Renaissance period. They were required to govern among citizens that were under their jurisdiction, which effectively made them the local government, as well as being required to settle disputes. They also distributed land amongst some of their citizens, but also relied on labor for peasants. The only difference between the roles of aristocrats and nobles during these two eras is that culturally, aristocrats during the Renaissance took the role of also sponsoring artistic talent during the Renaissance. However, essentially speaking, during both eras they had the same responsibilities when it came to their citizens and their social image, as both with social events such as balls and other such activities. My second and last reason why I believe that the Renaissance was not biased towards the aristocrats is that paintings that were created and became popular during the Renaissance period were focused on aspects not related to aristocracies, such as the Primavera, the Birth of Venus, the Last Supper, Venus and Perbino, and the list goes on. All of these paintings that I have just listed down are paintings depicting various subjects, such as the Christian religion and the painting The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci, and gods from Roman mythology from various paintings like Venus or Perbino and the Birth of Venus. All of these paintings were very popular during the time, so even though there was no shortage of great paintings made about aristocrats, there's also no shortage of popular and great paintings that are not related to aristocracy, which substantiates my claim that the Renaissance period was not biased towards aristocrats because there are many other popular Renaissance paintings that were centered around ideas not related to aristocracy or aristocratic people. Finally, I will begin my summary. Our first speaker spoke to you about how popular artists during the Renaissance period came from humble beginnings and how Renaissance artists that also aristocrats were not very popular. Our second speaker spoke to you about how artworks during the Renaissance period were projected towards talent instead of money. Based on the research our second speaker had done, it is stated that the Renaissance was a fervent period of European cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth following the Middle Ages, and not in fact a period where aristocrats would put in the best life and put in the spotlight. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we, the negative team of this debate, believe that the Renaissance was not biased towards aristocrats for a number of reasons. starting with what our first speaker talked about during the speech, which is about how artists were not aristocratic, and if they were, made artworks that were not very popular, which related to the debate due to the fact that artworks and inventions were the main focus of the Renaissance. And our second speaker spoke about how the Renaissance was the period of time in Europe that introduced a lot of inventions and innovations from talented men, not an era of time that was known for its famous, rich, and noble aristocrats. Lastly, I talked about how the Renaissance was not biased towards aristocrats due to the fact that aristocrats did not gain any part from their duties and responsibilities that have been part of their role for a number of years in Europe, as well as the fact that paintings were focused on aspects of religion, and a few paintings that were focused on showing off the jewelry and the nobility of some aristocrats. And if paintings were focused on both of these aspects, that would mean that the Renaissance period was not biased towards aristocrats, and instead the paintings that the creators of these artworks. These are the many reasons as to why we should win this debate, and the reasons on why the Renaissance was not in fact biased towards aristocrats. Thank you.
Alright. I'll give you about, are you going to say something? About 14 seconds for a rebuttal or no? Do you want to add something to what Marshall said? Do you want to say something? Go ahead. This is just because Marshall was not able to add something about what we said. Okay, so just 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Wait, what?
Just 30 seconds to react to what Gavin said. Do you have anything to say about what
No.
Gavin said?
No, Gavin said.
Yes. Ciara. What's
You
Ciara?
couldn't say
Oh
anything.
yeah,
You
that's
couldn't
right,
say
sorry. Ciara, what Ciara said.
Okay, so the second affirmative speaker is going to tell you that the Renaissance was biased towards the aristocrats because of the fact that
Speak closer to the mic.
Alright, the second speaker is trying to tell you that the Renaissance was biased towards the aristocrats because of the fact that aristocrats were funding these famous artists. It's wrong because, well, yes, the aristocratic party were able to give the funds to these famous artists. Some artists didn't even need these funds to make great artwork, such as Giovanni Benedetto Castiglione, whose main art style is known to be monotype, a technique that mostly relied on a type of etching through copying and primitive printing of colorless etch on a canvas, which came out as a beautiful piece of art.
Okay, thumbs up. Thank
yeah.
you so much, Karen. Marshall was not able to react to what Ciara said. Okay, so let's just give the judge. Second Give the judge to take some time. Thank you very much for taking attention. Okay, so I hope that the audience was able to think about the ways that the first group was able to conduct themselves and learn from that, relate, and know how you'll have your speeches made on shoot stage. We'd like to ask the judges to comment on today's speech. Who would like to start?
Us? Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, so can I go speaker for speaker?
Yes.
Yeah, sige. So for both Lucy and Nicker, I like the fact that you were able to clearly give out who was assigned what position and the terms. For Lucy, I like the way you pointed out that education was indeed an advantage, right? But I also like the way Nicker said that even though education was an advantage, it did come from humble beginnings, right? For the second speaker, I like the way Ciara was able to, Ciara was able to rebut that Donatello was educated in a probably a city-state in spite of being from humble beginnings. But I like Kayan, and I like your second rebuttal, where you actually brought up someone that did not even go through the educational system, but was able to still shine through. That was a very good rebuttal. Gavin brought up how funding was important always for any artwork. Okay, with Marshall, I know he said something, but I couldn't quite understand it. Okay, I mean, he was speaking a bit too fast. I know it was good, but see, I wasn't able to write it down because I had a hard time remembering because of the speed of delivery. Okay, that's my own.
About the manner of your delivery.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Madanda.
I think that each and every speaker had the ideas that you delivered were very structured, organized, and notably with Gavin, I appreciated that you pointed out certain things that the other con side mentioned, like for example, their point on individualism and how you were able to rebut that clearly. Yeah, Lucy and Ciara delivered, I gave them perfect scores. So yeah, so that the audience ought to be able to learn from how structured and how clear their delivery was. Although I agree with the con side about focusing on the art. Like when you look at a sculpture, a painting, or a basilica, or whatever, you don't focus on, oh, this artist was poor, this artist was rich, or this artist was funded, so he has an advantage over. You just focus on the essence and on the beauty of the art, which was really one of your strong points. If you had dressed up a bit more, I think I would have given you more points.
They forgot.
Yeah, I think that's key. Audience, please make sure that you are dressed up and that you take it shows that you take the debate seriously.
On my end, because I've been watching Gr8 debate, even previously. So I think what I'm looking for today, the ideas you did the wonderful research, both teams, and I can see how you utilize resources well. But I'm looking for, normally in a debate, there are lines that would stand out. Maybe that's it for me. Key takeaways, lines that I will bring with me after I leave the debate, those lines. But both of the teams were able to defend the point that they're supposed to defend today, and were able to go about the speech in an orderly manner. But I would want, I think the other team would benefit from more clarity, the negative side, so we can understand more what you're trying to explain to us. Because you have really good points, it's just that I don't know if you need to deliver it with another person, more practice, I think, so you can pause and then make your point even clearer so we can understand it better. But overall, in terms of research and preparation, it's evident today that they did a lot of research, and we appreciate that.
Thank you. Would you like to announce the winner of this debate?
The winner.
Did you talk to each other already?
It would be
Madam Chairman.
the pro side.
All right, the pro side won this. You get something from me on Tuesday from Batangas. And then,
Not by a lot, by a thin margin.
It was a close margin.
Very close.
okay, please help me fix the room for the next one. Thank you for all your
That's the best last minute.